Hey, I'm Sun. I'm a privacy and security researcher, and you're watching the Privacy Guides. Yesterday on Twitter, I stumbled upon this tweet where Moxie was announcing that he was resigning, from Signal. He will no longer be CEO, looking for his replacement, and in the meantime, Brian Acton is going to be the interim CEO. That is a lot. I mean, I've been recommending Signal for the longest of times on this channel. I'll link to a few episodes in the description. I'm a big advocate of Signal. I think that Moxie's work has had a really profound impact on the privacy landscape. But one cannot deny that the past few years have been quite interesting. I mean, among other things, the source code of the server side was not updated for about a year on GitHub. Signal also was, advertised as being breached by Celebrite, which is quite a fascinating story, which I am really looking forward to going down that story or explaining that story today. And also, that's probably the one that got most people upset, Signal was now monetizing True Mobile Coin. And I actually rewatched this episode by The Hated One called Delete Signal. It's a good episode. I really like what The Hated One does, usually, although this time, or in general these days, I don't think the work of people in FOSS, open source software world, is celebrated enough. And I think that we are not putting our money where our hearts are, and that's really a problem. So I'm going to be unpacking all of this throughout this episode. So let's start. I mean, Signal originates from Open Whisper Systems, which originates from Whisper Systems, which was Moxie's first startup. It was a for-profit Silicon Valley startup that developed the foundation code that is now Signal. Twitter actually hired Moxie and bought Whisper Systems, but Moxie did not work for Twitter very long, and thankfully Twitter open sourced that code, which spawned Open Whisper Systems. And then around 2015, Signal, the app that we now know, was born. It was born from two pieces of technology, one called Text Secure and the other called Red Phone, if my memory is correct. So essentially, Signal has been in the making for about 10 years. What changed is that around the 2018s, when the Signal Foundation came to exist, things really sped up really quickly. So essentially, Signal had this really good source code that is now the Signal protocol. That source code was used by WhatsApp, and that's what really put Signal on the map. WhatsApp integrated the Signal code before WhatsApp was sold to Facebook. So at that point in time, my gut feeling is Brian Acton had really good intentions. Signal was a really good encryption protocol for, securing or making private conversations private. And eventually Brian sold to Facebook, and that's kind of where things turned to shit because Facebook started, integrating WhatsApp more and more within its advertising ecosystem or its tracking ecosystem. And that's when Elon Musk tweeted, use Signal, and then Signal adoption just skyrocketed. That put an enormous amount of stress on Signal's infrastructure. But at least thankfully, by that time, the Signal Foundation had come to exist. So essentially, Brian Acton had sold Facebook to WhatsApp and was being more and more interested by privacy and wrote a check to the Signal Foundation of $50 million. I thought back in the day that that was actually a donation. What I learned today doing research for this episode is that it's actually a loan. So he loaned Signal $50 million at 0% interest rate. And actually that loan has grown to about $100 million now. So essentially, the Signal protocol was being used by more and more people were now using Signal, which was also operating its own infrastructure. And that was becoming quite the burden financially. And when Elon tweeted this, Signal user base doubled practically overnight, crashed the servers, caused havoc, and Signal had to kind of restructure itself to be able to support more and more scale. And that is tremendously expensive to do. So, I mean, now, why was part of the code not published on GitHub for about a year? I don't know. It's kind of coincidental, though, that Signal later announced, that, it was testing payments and mobile coin integration, and that also had some roots into that backend code. Is that evil? I don't know. I mean, I can only imagine how much Moxie and the team has put into Signal, how expensive it must be to operate this when no one is really paying for it. I mean, have you ever contemplated donating to Signal? We should probably be valuing Signal at about $5 a month if we wanted Signal to be profitable. I mean, no one does this. People just expect free and open source software to be free and open source, and who cares how the developers, earn a living? And that's just not fair. So that's really the criticism that I have for this Delete Signal episode. I think that it's great that my mom can use an app such as Signal and that we can have conversations that are private. I think that to have this at a massive scale like Signal is operating at now, it's not sustainable. I think Signal will have to find a monetization strategy. And that makes me think about, MongoDB in the context of Amazon that kind of stole the code and, forked it in, or, Red Hat. It's just there are very few sustainable open source models where the founders of those open source projects are not just giving all of themselves to the projects and just struggling all the time. So I really hope that Moxie is, taking a break from this hustle and that his health is okay. But anyways, going back to this. So yeah, the servers, for a year were not necessarily open source. And then Celebrite said that it could breach Signal encryption, which is really hilarious, okay? Because essentially what it meant is if the phone was unlocked, they were able to extract information from Signal, which a human could essentially do. And the story gets even more interesting when, for some mysterious reason, and I'll link to those blog posts in the description, essentially Moxie found a kit, like the application kit of Celebrite that fell in front of him from a truck or something, which is kind of an odd story, but he reverse engineered it and found over 100 vulnerabilities in the code of this, app that people or nation state surveillance programs were using to infringe on people's freedom, essentially. And what's even more interesting, and I don't know if this is mentioned here at the bottom, I think it is, so I would really recommend reading this, but I love this completely unrelated part. So I'll read it because it's just so much fun. In completely unrelated news, upcoming versions of Signal will be periodically fetching files to place in app storage. These files are never used for anything inside Signal and never interact with Signal software or data, but they look nice. And aesthetics are important in software. Files will only be returned for accounts that have been active installs for some time already, and only probabilistically in low percentages based on phone number sharding. What's really interesting here is Moxie hacked them and essentially by reverse engineering their software realized that you could seed a file on a phone, and when their app reads that file, it makes the app go batshit crazy and essentially invalidates whatever incriminating stuff could be derived from scanning someone's phone, which is super cool. Now, I don't know if that's true, but I love how it adds a layer of plausible deniability here. Now, going back to Signal payments. I mean, one could argue that it would have been nice for Signal to allow, Bitcoin or Monero. Apparently, MobileCoin is highly inspired by Monero when it comes to the privacy preserving features. The thing that differs between MobileCoin and Bitcoin and or Monero is that it's a proof of stake technology, which means that it is more environmentally friendly, which is arguably a good thing. It really comes at the trade-off of the infrastructure behind MobileCoin being way more centralized. In the context of choosing MobileCoin over, Bitcoin and Monero, there's also the fact that MobileCoin is a for-profit startup that has raised over 100 million, valued at over $1 billion. So one could really argue if the governance is good and blah, blah, blah. That's where I really love Bitcoin because it is so decentralized. And the proof of work behind Bitcoin, the fact that it does require a massive amount of energy, is what makes it secure. It makes it very hard to tamper with. And that's what makes, Bitcoin really cool. And I guess that's what got a lot of crypto people really upset about MobileCoin. That said, the transactions are very secure by design. And if you're okay with some level of centralization while being relatively private, I don't think it's so bad. And the really cool feature of MobileCoin is that transactions take less than 5 seconds to settle on the blockchain, which means it's actually very close to how we do fiat transactions. If I give you $20, you immediately have that $20. It's yours. As where if we would transact on the Bitcoin blockchain, we would have to stay together for X amount of minutes to make sure that the transaction has settled on the blockchain. So I hope that kind of helps all of us make sense of some part of that story. The story is developing as we're talking. I wanted to get this out just so that, you know, we get the conversation started. By the way, I would love to hear your comments, you know, what you think about Signal and if you're okay with what's happening right now. And I'll be following the story. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. And I'll keep you guys updated on this. Now, I really, 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 really value what Moxie has done. If ever, Moxie, you listen to this, thanks so much for your contributions to the space. I think that Signal is a great example that we can build mainstream technology that is private, you know, or privacy conscious by design at scale. There are very few examples like this one, and I'm really, really, what's the word for this? Reconnaissant, like thankful for this. So that's all I have for you. I'll keep you updated as the story develops. I'm really anxious to know if he's okay. I really hope he is. I hope he's just taking a breather and taking some time off, because I'm sure developing Signal must have been painstaking. Yeah, I'll see you soon. Bye.